The gym groaned like an old man in his sleep. Rusted hinges wheezed as the heavy metal door creaked open, revealing a cavernous, dust-laden room that once pulsed with the rhythm of fists and feet. Ayana stepped in slowly, her sneakers crunching against broken tile and bits of fallen plaster. The air was thick with the scent of mildew, sweat embedded in the very bones of the place, and something metallic, like dried blood and old victories. She paused near the threshold, letting her eyes adjust to the half-light that filtered through cracks in the ceiling. Sunlight spilled in lazy streaks, catching the motes of dust as they danced slowly in the air. It looked like ghosts fighting to breathe. The girl was only 17 but carried herself like she'd been alive for centuries. Her hair was tucked under a faded black wrap, her hoodie several sizes too big, sleeves pulled down over calloused knuckles. She wore silence like armor. This wasn't her first time here, just the first since the snow had melted. The old sign outside read, Hartman Boxing Club, the letters barely legible beneath the graffiti and bird droppings. Nobody came here anymore. No coaches, no fighters, just echoes. Ayana took a breath and crossed into the center of the room. The ring still stood, if barely, a skeleton of its former self, ropes sagging, corner pads torn and bleeding foam. She ran a hand over the top rope and felt the dust rise like memory. Her father used to train here, before the warehouse job, before the accident, before the silence. She didn't come here looking for glory. She came because this place knew her father's footsteps, because the walls remembered what he once dreamed, and because out there in the world of noise and questions and people who didn't see her, there was no room to fail. But here, failure was allowed. It could live and breathe and scream, and no one would stop her. She dropped her backpack near the bench, knelt down and began wrapping her hands with strips of worn fabric. The wraps were uneven, a bit too loose on one side, but she didn't care. They weren't for show. She stood up, rolled her neck, shook out her arms, and walked over to the heavy bag in the corner. It was held together with duct tape, swaying slightly as if waiting for her. Ayana squared her shoulders, planted her feet, and threw her first jab. It landed awkward, too far out. She reset. Threw it again, a little better, then a cross, then a hook. She worked through the motions like reciting a prayer, unsure if she believed, but desperate to speak. Her breath came in quick bursts. She tried to remember the rhythm. Two-step, pop, slide, duck. Her father used to clap a beat with his hands. 1, 2, pivot, out. He'd say it in his deep voice, the one that could command a room or soothe her to sleep. She could still hear it some days, faint as a whisper behind her ear. 30 minutes in, her shoulder began to ache. She ignored it. Her pulse was wild now, her feet slipping on the uneven floor. The bag hit her on the return swing, knocking her back a step. She cursed, shook out her hand, and turned away, pacing in a slow circle. Her breath fogged in the chill air. The gym had no heat, but it didn't matter. The cold kept her sharp. Ayana grabbed the jump rope next. The plastic cord was cracked and stiff, but it still did its job. She began slowly, timing the rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. Then faster. The rope slapped the ground like a metronome. Her lungs burned, but she didn't stop. Her feet stumbled, caught the rope, tripped. She hit the floor with a thud. She groaned, lying there, the concrete seeping cold through her back. Above her, the ceiling stared back, vast and empty. There were holes up there. Through one of them, she could see a thin slice of blue sky. It looked impossibly far away. She sat up and wrapped her arms around her knees. For a long minute, she stayed like that, quiet, head down, breath slowing. Then the tears came, silent, traitorous things. She wiped them with the back of her hand and muttered to herself, "You're being dramatic." But still, the doubt lingered, hanging heavy in her chest. Why was she doing this? Nobody was watching. Nobody cared. She wasn't fast enough, wasn't strong enough. Not like the girls she saw online, the ones with perfect form and expensive gear and gyms with working light bulbs. She was just Ayana, 17 and tired, training in a corpse of a gym for a fight that didn't exist. She stood again, more stubborn than inspired. That's what her mother used to say. You get that from your father, the stubborn part. She went back to the bag, fists clenched now. Her knuckles throbbed, but she hit anyway. Not to win, to finish. Hours passed this way, in rounds of silence and movement. The city outside went on without her, cars, sirens, shouts, but none of it reached her here. Here, she was nothing and everything. Just a girl trying. Just a girl remembering. It was almost evening when she finally collapsed onto the bench, sweat dripping down her face, hoodie damp and sticking to her back. Her chest heaved. Her hands trembled. She looked over at the ring again. A single thought kept turning in her mind. Maybe this wasn't for her. Maybe the fire she thought she had was just a flicker pretending to be flame. She took out her phone and stared at the dark screen. No notifications, no missed calls. She didn't even know what she wanted to see. A sign, a message, something that said, "Keep going." But the screen stayed silent. Her reflection shimmered faintly in a broken mirror near the locker room. She caught her own eyes and didn't recognize them. They looked older somehow. Worn. Ayana pulled her hoodie over her head and made her way to the door. Her steps were slow now, her body sore in that deep, bone-level way. The kind of sore that wasn't just physical. She reached for the door handle, but didn't pull it open. Instead, she stood there, eyes closed, listening. The gym was quiet again. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of waiting. Like it knew she'd be back. Like it believed in her more than she believed in herself. Ayana turned around and looked once more at the heavy bag, the jump rope, the broken ring. And for some reason she couldn't explain, she smiled. The rain came down in thin slashes against the cracked windows, tapping like restless fingers on glass. The gym felt colder than usual, the kind of cold that crawled into your fingertips and made every movement feel like lifting concrete. Ayana was already 2 rounds into her shadow boxing, her arms heavy, sweat dripping from her brow despite the chill. She'd learned not to wait for warmth in this place. The heat had to come from her. Each punch, each breath, each stubborn step forward. Her breath hissed between her teeth as she pivoted on the worn floor, left foot leading, fists cutting through the dusty air. She imagined herself in a real ring, crowd roaring in her mind. Her opponent was made of fear and doubt, and every strike she landed was another reason to keep going. She ducked low, sprang up with a tight hook, spun out. But her ankle slid slightly on the damp concrete, forcing her to recalibrate. It wasn't perfect, it never was. But it was hers. She was mid-combination when it happened. A sound, soft, unfamiliar, cut through the rhythm of her training. Footsteps. Not echoes from her own shuffling feet, not the usual creaks of an old building settling in the rain, but deliberate steps. Slow, confident, not hesitant like someone sneaking in. They sounded like they belonged. Ayana froze. The sound came again. Boots by the sound of it, wet from the rain, stepping onto concrete. Her breath hitched. She turned toward the entrance, heart thudding harder than any round she'd just fought. There, standing in the open doorway framed by grey light and drizzle, was a man. Medium height, broad shoulders, black hoodie, gym bag slung over one shoulder. His face was in shadow for a moment. Then he stepped in, and her heart stopped. She blinked. Thought maybe she was imagining it. Some trick of exhaustion or too much time alone. But no, it was him. Manny Pacquiao. His face was unmistakable. The calm seriousness of his eyes, the short hair, the slight smile that barely curved his lips, like he was still deciding whether or not to smile at all. He looked older than in the posters that used to hang in her father's room, but stronger in a quieter way. A living legend. A myth made flesh. He took a few steps inside and looked around, nodding to himself like he recognized the ghosts in the room. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said. Ayana couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Her gloves hung useless at her sides. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. Manny looked at her with warm curiosity. "You train here?" She nodded, still stunned. He looked around again. "This gym used to belong to Hartman, right? Eddie Hartman? I trained here once, long time ago." Ayana finally found her voice. "Yeah, my dad knew him. This was his gym." Manny stepped further in, wiping his shoes carefully on the mat near the entrance, as if honoring the place by not dragging in too much mud. I was nearby for a community event, passed by this street and I remembered. Thought I'd stop in, see if it was still standing. Ayana still couldn't believe it. Manny Pacquiao, in this gym, her gym. She realized she must look like a mess, sweaty, hair wild, clothes too big, hands taped with frayed wraps. She suddenly felt like she was made of broken parts and unfinished sentences. Manny seemed to sense her discomfort. He gestured gently toward the heavy bag. "You were working hard, I didn't mean to interrupt. If you want to keep going, I'll stay out of the way." Ayana shook her head. No, I mean it's fine. You're Manny Pacquiao." He chuckled softly. "Still, I didn't mean to barge in." He looked around again, more slowly this time. His expression changed. Something deeper settled over him, a kind of quiet reverence. Places like this, they never really die, you know. They just wait for someone to bring them back. Ayana didn't know what to say. Her legs were still trembling, but not from the workout anymore, from the unreality of the moment. This couldn't be happening. Manny dropped his bag near the bench and looked at her again. "You fight." "I'm learning," she said, unsure whether that was the truth or a deflection. He tilted his head. "Learning's good. You're already ahead of the ones who never try." There was a pause, and then, without ceremony, he asked, "Want me to hold the mitts for you?" Ayana blinked again. "What?" He smiled now, fully. "Pads, mitts, whatever you call them. I have a pair in my bag. I'll hold them, if you want." Her voice failed her a second time. He was serious. He wasn't joking. Manny Pacquiao had just offered to hold pads for her. I mean, if you really don't mind." "I wouldn't offer if I minded," he said with a shrug. He moved to his bag, pulled out a set of mitts, black leather, worn but clean, and slipped them on. "Just basic stuff," he said. "We'll go slow, jab cross to start." Ayana wiped her palms against her thighs, shook out her hands, and stepped forward like someone walking into a dream. He raised the pads. She threw a jab. It landed softly, hesitant. He nodded. Again, faster. She threw it again, a little sharper. "Now add the cross." She did. Slower than she wanted, but cleaner than before. "Good. Again." They moved in rhythm for a few minutes. Jab, cross, reset, jab, cross. His voice was calm but clear, always constructive. He corrected her elbow angle, showed her how to turn her hip just slightly to get more power. He wasn't critical. He was precise. Every note came from care, not ego. He stepped back for a moment. "Your feet. That's your foundation, not your fists. Want to see something?" He dropped into stance, light on his feet, and demonstrated a simple pivot. "This little movement here, it's everything. Balance, escape, power. Without it, the punch is just a push." She mirrored him. He nodded, approving. They worked like that for what felt like hours. Time bent. The storm outside faded from consciousness. The gym came alive again, filled with the sound of breath and leather and quiet encouragement. At one point he paused, studying her stance. "You know," he said, "when I was starting out, I trained in places worse than this. No bags, no mitts, just gravel roads and a borrowed pair of gloves. All I had was hunger. Hunger and God." Ayana listened closely. There was no pride in his voice, just memory. "You've got hunger," he said. "I can see it." She swallowed hard. "I don't know if it's enough." He gave her a long look. "It's always enough. If you don't quit." They resumed. He upped the pace, called out combinations, threw in a slip, a weave, a counter. She kept up, barely, but something clicked in her, a rhythm, a fire, a clarity. The movement stopped being imitation. They started to feel like hers. When they finally stopped, Ayana was soaked in sweat, lungs burning, arms shaking. Manny took off the mitts and nodded with quiet satisfaction. "You're raw," he said, "but you've got something." "Thank you," she managed, her throat thick. He picked up his bag. "I have to go, flight tonight." Her heart dropped a little. "But I'll be back," he said, glancing at the room again. "If this place is still standing, I'll find it." She nodded, still stunned. He walked toward the door, then paused. "What's your name?" "Ayana." He smiled. "Keep fighting, Ayana." And then he was gone, swallowed by the rain and the fading light. Ayana stood there for a long time, alone again. But it didn't feel like before. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of something new. The rain had stopped by the next morning, but the sky remained low and grey, as if unsure whether to clear or collapse again. The streets glistened with leftover puddles and the remnants of wind-blown paper cups and leaves. The city still whispered its familiar noise, cars, dogs barking in the distance, the metallic wail of a bus brake, but inside the gym, it was quiet. Quiet, not like before, not like loneliness. This was the kind of quiet that hummed with potential. Ayana arrived early, earlier than ever before. Her alarm had gone off at 5, but she was already awake when it did. She'd dreamed of footwork and punch angles, of leather cracking against pads, and her father's voice layered over Manny Pacquiao's, both murmuring advice that felt like prophecy. It wasn't a clean dream, but it was the kind that sits in your chest, like warmth. Something had shifted. She unlocked the side gate, pushed the door open, and the gym greeted her not like a stranger but a co-conspirator, a silent ally. She dropped her bag and didn't hesitate. Her hands moved automatically, wraps, gloves, mouthguard. There was no wasted motion. She had a plan. The last 3 days had been a kind of resurrection. Manny had come back each morning, quiet as always, never announcing himself. No entourage, no photographers, just a man with a duffel bag and a purpose. He had trained with her like she mattered, like her efforts were not only valid but valuable. He never flinched at her stumbles. He didn't laugh when she slipped or flared her elbows too wide. He just watched, then corrected, patient, exact. He told her things no video ever had. He asked her to think, not just repeat. "Where's your weight right now? What's your exit after that combo? Why did you pause your breath right there?" Questions like that made her realize how much of her training had been mechanical, copy and hope, punch and pray. But now she was learning how to see, how to feel. The bag wasn't just a target, it was an opponent. Her feet weren't just transport, they were foundation, tempo, survival. She found herself jotting things down in a small spiral notebook at night. Short phrases, concepts. Punch through, not ate. Every pivot saves your ribs. Breath is your metronome. You fight with your brain first. On the second day, he brought a double-end bag and helped her rig it up in the corner. "This'll teach you timing," he said, tapping it with his fingers until it danced. "And humility." She had laughed, winded but grateful. She'd never seen one up close, much less used one. It was faster than she was. Smarter, too, it seemed. But after 20 minutes of chasing it and getting popped in the face more than once, something in her adjusted. Her hands moved quicker. Her eyes learned to read the rhythm. She stopped fighting the bag and started flowing with it. And then there was the sparring simulation. That had come on the 3rd day. Manny arrived like usual, but this time he had 2 sets of headgear and a pair of light gloves. "No hitting," he said. "Just movement, just rhythm. You're going to face yourself today." Ayana had stared at the gloves. "But I've never—" "I'll guide you," he said. "Don't think about winning. Think about solving." They'd moved in slow motion at first. He barely touched her, just feints and subtle steps, and she tried to keep up. She chased too much, leaned in, overextended. He let her make every mistake, then paused and explained each one like a teacher fixing a student's form. "See that?" he said after one exchange. "You threw a hook without a setup. You committed too early. A good fighter makes you open the door first, then walks through it." She nodded, sweat running into her eyes. Her chest burned, her thighs were sore, but something about being in that ring, imaginary ropes, imaginary bell, made her feel more awake than she had in years. They danced that way for nearly an hour, her getting sharper, more precise, less noise in her movements, less panic. At one point, she landed a clean body feint and stepped outside his lead hand. He froze just for a beat, then grinned. "There it is," he said. "That's a fighter's instinct." She hadn't smiled in the ring before that. Not really. But now she did. She wasn't winning, but she wasn't drowning either. She was swimming, and now he was gone. He'd left the night before after the final round of pads, a towel over his shoulder and a small black duffel in his hand. Before leaving, he'd reached into the bag and pulled out something wrapped in a cloth. He handed it to her gently. "These are yours now," he said. Ayana opened the cloth. Inside was a pair of old fight gloves, faded red, worn at the seams but still intact, still powerful. "They've seen the lights of Vegas," he said, "but they belong here now, with someone who remembers why we start." She held them like relics. He looked around one last time at the ring, the peeling walls, the worn bags, and then back at her. "Keep making this place breathe," he said, "and don't wait for permission to fight." Then he was gone. Now standing in the center of the ring alone, Ayana wore those gloves. They felt different, not because they were magic, not because they carried some special power, but because they carried weight, history, discipline, belief. She tightened the laces, bounced lightly on her toes, and started her first solo round since his departure. Her jabs were sharper now, her pivots cleaner. She didn't flinch at the bag swinging back. She moved around it like she was playing chess on her feet, always thinking 2 moves ahead. Her breathing stayed steady, in through the nose, out through the teeth, a low hiss that matched the beat of her fists. She wasn't perfect, but she wasn't guessing anymore. The mirror on the far wall, cracked from corner to corner, still reflected enough to show her shape. She caught glimpses of her form mid-motion. It didn't look like a kid pretending anymore. It looked like someone building something. Ayana set the timer for 3-minute rounds and went through 6 without rest. By the last one, her legs screamed, but her hands still moved. She shouted through her mouthguard, not words, but something close to defiance. The gym echoed it back to her, and for the first time it felt like it was cheering. She dropped to the bench at the bell, chest heaving, soaked in sweat. Her arms dangled at her sides. She looked at her gloves, then around the room. It didn't look as broken now. The ropes still sagged, the ceiling still leaked, the lights still flickered, but something had changed. Or maybe it was just her. Ayana stood again and walked toward the mirror. She pulled off the gloves and let them drop softly to the floor. Her reflection stared back, chest rising and falling, cheeks red, eyes bright. "You're not done," she said to the mirror. "You're just getting started." The words rang out, and the gym, quiet as it was, didn't argue. The ring wasn't a place to sleep. It was where you woke up.